Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. This is going to be an interesting one. This was actually recorded back in the fall, right after John Robertson had won the Amateur Crown Championships. Had some things happen to where this recording didn't make it into season one, but it's such a good recording. I wanted to make sure that it was one of the first things that was released here in season two. So some of this might be a little weird and out of date, talking about hunting season and things of that nature. But anyway, this is a fantastic episode. I hope you all enjoy it.
Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rudd, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in.
I could not be more excited to do this with the new, I'm calling him the King of the Crown, because not only did he win the amateur this year, but he also scored the lowest, which is the best of all of everybody that ran the crown. So people probably are like, what is the King of the Crown? Well, today that's John Robertson. At least for this year, that's John Robertson. So John, welcome, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on here. I thought our second episode would be, just popular demand. But I guess King of the Crown, we'll go with that for today.
Yeah, yeah, man. Well, seriously, congratulations. I know I was texting you the whole time, being like, watching you on the live stream and being like, go, John. And for the record, I did pick you and Kate to be in the top 5. I did not pick you guys to win, but and if you look at the SRS stuff, you won't see that because I forgot to do it. But my training group, we had a little bet, and I texted before anybody ran. I was like, crap, I forgot to actually fill the bracket out. I tried a few times and I just had an issue. I couldn't figure out why. Every time I went to hit submit, it would go back and I had to redo it all. Don't know I think it was on my end. I don't think it was Google's issue or whoever was hosting that survey, but I texted it to my friend Josh, or he texted it back to me. That's what it was. And you were in the top 5. So
very nice. Well,
I feel like I called it a little bit.
I would imagine probably not a lot of people had her in the top 6, and I'm even worse because I heard people talking about the pick'em while we were down there, and I was like, I don't even know what you all are talking about right now. So I missed the boat on that one.
Yeah. Top 6, not top 5. My bad. But so I was following along the whole time. I was really, really stoked once I saw you smash the first series. I felt really good about your chances, and I couldn't help but think about how the last time we did a podcast, we were at Hickory Hills, and you're basically competing with this. I mean, most of the people that were doing well were at that SRS. Right. If you look at, kind of the results, like there is quite a few of the same folks that were in the top, 12, top 15 in the M were there. And it's, it's crazy that you go, I know this was your first crown. Mm-hmm. You go to your first crown and you win, and you don't make it out of the second series at that weekend one.
The Ohio event. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Just crazy.
I actually, it was after that first series, which Kate was pretty. I can't remember where she was in the order, 12th, somewhere in there, and was one of the first dogs to hit it pretty good. And, so immediately people are, oh, you got a target on your back now. And I, more times than I care to admit, told the story of, our last weekend event in Ohio, we left the first series with, I think, a 6, and we left the second series with like a 192.
Yeah.
So whatever it was. And some of that was my own fault, but it just goes to show, even when you do well in one series or a couple, you've still got the next one to deal with.
Yeah. So yeah, that is definitely the hardest part about running SRS stuff, or pretty much any competitive dog game, is like you could be sitting so good and then just an implosion happens.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, I think we talked about it in the last episode, but and time will tell whether it continues or if it's just the crop of dogs right now. But the amateur division, just a really strong group of dogs. So, you hit a good series, but if you have a bobble in the next one, there's pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be another dog or a handful that run it well. So you just got to keep plugging away.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about since the last podcast that we did. So we did that podcast. I don't remember when was it.
That was July, June.
Was it July?
Yeah.
And you had some other success leading up to that, leading up to the Crown. So kind of what was kind of your focus for the remainder of the summer?
So I'm trying to think. That was definitely the last Super Retriever Series event we ran, and then it may have been another month or so. I don't think we ran anything in August. So spent the majority of August just training, and then September, October primarily just focused on field trials. And the all age trials is definitely one of those things where you've just got to take the little wins. I mean, the odds of you finishing one even aren't that great. So I can't remember for the life of me how many we've ran, 4 or 5 maybe this fall. Kate ended up finishing an amateur right before, I think the weekend before the Crown. So that was a good thing, finished on a strong note. But, other than that, there wasn't a whole lot to show for the fall field trial season other than, I saw a lot of good things, a lot of good decisions, but that's the way those go. They're tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you, everybody always asks about like getting a dog to peak at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've talked about this off, just in our other conversations, like that's not really the way we exactly think. And trying to get them to peak, we're just trying to always keep them in a good space. But did you have any like indicators that you felt like, wow, Kate's really on it?
I would say the couple weeks leading up to the Crown, I felt like she was marking fairly well. But to say that it was like a noticeable difference, not really. And I definitely think there are dogs that peak at certain periods of time. And to be totally honest, ask me again 3 or 4 years from now, I might say, yeah, in the fall is usually when she peaks. But no, I would say a couple weeks before I just felt like she was running pretty good. And then leading into, felt like she was confident, making good decisions, marking well in training.
Yeah. So what was the experience of going to the Crown like? Like, because obviously this is your first one. I've never been to one. I've only seen it from the TV perspective. I'm sure you've watched the live stream plenty.
Yeah.
What was it like, and how was it maybe different than watching it on TV?
So now, do you want me to start from like the very beginning, or are you just talking the test?
Sure, we got time, man. Let's go.
Well,
the very beginning.
I will say that it's a well organized event. The test started on Tuesday, but the handlers got there on Monday, so they do an armband draw sometime in the afternoon on Monday. Then they had an awards banquet afterwards. So just a very well organized, put together event. I was very impressed with everybody involved. But then, as far as the testing goes, that all started on Tuesday. And you really do get a pretty decent feel on the live stream for what it's like in real time. Because on the live stream, I mean, they're showing everything from the setup to, when the judges are explaining the test, you get to hear the questions to the marshal. So other than just like the perspective from the line versus what you're seeing on the camera, it's a little bit different. But outside of that, no, you pretty much get to see it all on the live stream.
I always felt like it too, and especially like even like I always like last year I was texting Clark when he was running dogs and stuff. He didn't really text me back probably because he was too busy running more dogs.
Busy,
but with you, like I was like, dude, you smashed that, blah blah blah, and then we were like, like I can't believe that was what they gave you, and then like and all changed, and I was like but like I felt like I could see this year. Like I could see where the dogs were, the dogs' decisions, and I was trying to score along with just for from my practice as a person that wants to continue to run SRSs. And I was like, I was pretty accurate to what was going on. So that's pretty cool that the that the live stream is as it's pretty close to what it is like what it's like in real life.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
were some of the things that like surprised you about the Crown, or was it pretty much like another dog
Yeah,
competition?
it's just, I guess for me, it's just kind of another event, and I'm pretty bad about once something like that starts, I'm just pretty narrow-minded. I'm not narrow-minded, but I'm pretty focused on, what's going on. I enjoy watching the dogs while I'm there. We don't get a ton of opportunity to do that, but the whole time you're watching other dogs run, trying to get a feel for some of the issues you might see once you get up there, and then afterwards, obviously, you're paying attention because you trying to understand how they score, seeing where other dogs, how they end up doing. But then you're also kind of already starting to put a game plan together for the next day.
Was with being able to see, like, were you watching it on your phone before you were running and stuff, or
Yeah, I did a little bit of both. I wasn't watching much like before I ran, but afterwards, we would go back just because we have one dog every now and then. We'd just go back to the hotel, and that's the luxury of having the live stream is you're not really missing anything, and oftentimes you're getting a little bit better perspective. Because you've got Pat and Chris on the first day commentating, and sometimes that can even be more beneficial just listening to them than watching the dogs.
yeah, yeah. Oh, what was it that Chris Aiken said about you after your first run? I gotta look this up. I texted it to you because I thought it was hilarious. Did you
Yeah,
see
that
this
was
before
funny.
I texted it to you?
No, I didn't. It wasn't until later that afternoon that I watched it. But he said
Yeah,
something about I was going to remember that either the run or the mark when I was in my casket.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pull it up here. Chris Aiken just said, "You're gonna remember that moment in your casket."
yeah, yeah,
I thought that was so funny.
yeah.
Uh, that's when you know you're gonna and you have a good run when somebody says you remembered in your casket. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny.
That was a good one. And in all honesty, she was like the 12th dog to run, and there had been a handful of dogs in that first series that had actually picked it up without handling. She was probably the first one to hit it pretty well. But
Yeah,
I certainly did not expect like the remainder of that day, and then the test holds true for another half day after that. There was really only, I think, a handful maybe that even picked it up clean. So.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, what else? What else about the crown that's worth mentioning?
Well, you're just kind of so wrapped up in the the dogs, what they're doing, what you're doing as a handler, coming up with a game plan for each series. It's not really until afterwards, the dust settles and you can kind of reflect on everything that happened. But you're so caught up in what's going on while you're there. It's kind of hard to explain without unless you experience it. But
Yeah,
yeah, in a funny way, I'm not going to say that the experience in Ohio was a good thing, but you do learn from your own mistakes. And I knew after that event that it doesn't matter how good of a dog you have. Like if you're not focused at the line, so for whatever it's worth, anybody that wasn't paying attention there, it was a quad, I think, and I
mm-hmm.
got the order of the birds mixed up. So I put Kate in a pretty difficult position trying to pick those up. But it just goes to show, I'm sitting there watching dogs all day run, and here we are towards the end, and I get the bird order mixed up. So you've got to stay focused while you're running dogs.
Yeah. You got to keep the count. You got to use. Yeah, you got to keep your plan. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Uh, so what? I pretty much knew that you had won once you ran. Did you feel like because just looking at how big of a gap you had and then the run that you had, were you pretty much like I just won the crown, or did you not
Uh,
really sink in until later
You're talking about in the fifth
in the
series.
fifth series? Yeah,
Well, yeah, I just with the scoring and watching a handful of the other amateur dogs run, I knew that if Kate ran that series fairly well, and by that I mean you don't blow up on the blind, you don't. There was a 50-point penalty, I think, like if you missed I don't know if you could see it on the live stream, but there was a snow goose decoy right on the
The
edge of
left
that stand.
side. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. If you missed that as a 50-point penalty, I think if you didn't get back in the water on the blind, you had the point at the very end. If you didn't get back in the water, there was a penalty there. So you can certainly rack up a whole lot of points, if you struggle on that blind. But I knew that if, she picked up the marks fairly decently, that yeah, she probably would have a low enough score going into it that she would be winning at that point.
So when it happened, when she picked up that last bird, like what was the
Oh,
feeling like, or what'd you
well,
think?
yeah, it's just it's such a surreal, yeah, it was definitely a surreal feeling.
Because you didn't move, you just stood there. Like, did you
Well,
watch
yeah,
it?
and
You're just like,
yeah, there's an awful lot going on underneath the
yeah,
surface. Probably can't see on the live stream there, but yeah, it's definitely an emotional moment, and as well as all the amateurs that train their own dogs and that handle their dogs. You put so much time, energy, and effort into just getting to the point where you can qualify and participate in a crown. So to go out and win it is definitely a culmination of a lot of thought, intention, hard work, and energy. So yeah, to experience it that way, it's kind of an indescribable experience. Something I certainly wasn't counting on going down there.
yeah. What were your well, two questions. One, like, what did you do? You remember what you thought when she was, coming back with that last bird? Do you remember what you were kind of going through in your mind?
Oh, I pretty much knew. I pretty much knew at that time that she had won. But other than just thinking, it's just such a surreal feeling. It's like, yeah, that really just happened, didn't it?
Yeah, it's
Um,
probably a little
or
bit of disbelief, right? Like,
yeah,
I,
kind
I
of,
I can't believe, like, my first crown, I came here and this is what happened.
kind of. Yeah, that would be a good way of putting it. Yep, it's just a hard feeling to describe, and one it takes a while for it to sink in.
Yeah, and so for those that don't know, John's dad, does he train with you like almost every day or quite a bit?
So I would say it's kind of funny how this has evolved. And my dad is retired, and so I'll take a step back. I was super happy that he was down there, got to experience the whole thing. And just for Leah Spivey, just commentating there at the end, mentioning that him and I trained together. I He probably wouldn't admit it out loud, but I think that was probably his favorite part of the whole deal. But yeah, so I would not every day, but 2, 3, if I can convince him to do it. Sometimes four times a week. He'll meet me somewhere and he'll throw birds. He's pretty patient with me, and I've gotten a little bit better over time about nitpicking here and there. But yeah, I without his help throwing birds, I mean, you couldn't do the field trial stuff, the long game. You've really got to have somebody there to help.
Yeah.
Uh,
And most of the places you're training at, he's not using an ATV or anything, right? He's just
yeah,
walking.
so some of that is because I don't own an ATV. I mean, and neither does he. So we started out. I started out training for Hunt Tests. So wherever I could get permission to train, I was just lugging 3 or 4 wingers out to a field, and it's just always kind of stayed that way. And I still do that. I mean, even when he comes out to help, we're still incorporating wingers. I have many a time walked wingers 350, 400 yards and then, go back out there, pick them up, and do the same thing the next day. It's just, as an amateur, you just kind of got to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm very proud of you because of that. Like, I'm fortunate now I have an ATV and I have another really cool place to train. But up until last year, the end of last year, like, I was doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Finding where, this abandoned field behind a Home Depot that was planned to be developed that hasn't been developed, and humping gear in there. And my good friend of mine, Troy, was telling me that there was this Starbucks that his wife worked at. And for like the longest time, I was running like a pattern blind there. And finally, one day, he texted me and said, "Hey, can you take a couple of days off? The girls at Starbucks are really annoyed by your whistle." I was like,
That's hilarious.
I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, his wife worked at, I don't know if I said that, his wife worked at that Starbucks, and
Yeah.
that's how that whole thing, kind of came down. But it, I know how much literal like sweat equity and just carrying that in, and then to have your dad, to be a part of that is just so cool. And when I texted Jeremy and I said, "Hey, congratulations, I'm breeding a crown champion," and he
Yeah.
commented back, congrats to John and his dad. It's definitely it's well known that that's a team effort, and
Yeah.
seeing your dad at every SRS that I've been to, that you've been at, is just so cool that you guys get to do that. And it's such a great accomplishment to do it. Was Kate 100% trained by you? Like, did she ever go to a pro, or?
Oh yeah, I still have. I actually picked her up pretty early, between 6.5 and 7 weeks. But I have a video still of the first mark that we ever threw her, just out here in front of my garage. There's a big white bumper, and I think even back then I sent it to Jeremy. Said something like, "We got a pretty good marker here." And obviously, they're all FCs at that age, but. Yeah, no, the training has been, all us from the very beginning.
Man,
And
that's cool.
yeah, it's a lot of it's a labor of love, that.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it, and to be entirely honest with you, I didn't even know any different about, walking wingers out versus having an ATV really until we started running field trials, because we still use wingers to train for that stuff. And the white trash bags with the yard stakes, like those are our white coats. And you get to talking to some field trial people and explain to them how you train. They're like, "What do you mean you don't have a ATV?"
ATV, like, how do you function without one?
What do you mean you use trash bags? Like, well, I don't know, it's white. I don't think
I mean, my white coats are two blind stakes with white curtains that I've like zip tied to either side of it, and I showed them to Clark one day. He's like, "What is that?" I was like, "It doesn't matter. It's white. They can see it." He's like, "Well, they're gonna figure out that it's not a person." I was like, "They already know there's not a person there."
Right.
But anyway,
maybe someday we can do a separate podcast on how to incorporate, like, if you've got one person. How do you, because you can actually, if you give it some thought, you can use those trash bags and one person to your advantage, encouraging him to look out at a long bird, looking past a shorter bird, stuff like that. So you can accomplish the majority of the same things.
Yep. No, I mean, and it's just a true I mean, I just hope that people are encouraged, hearing your story, getting basic to the top of the Hunt Test game. I mean, that's what the crown is. It's becoming, very, I wouldn't say it's like an NFC, but it's getting there to where it means like something significant.
Yeah,
So to do that, that's really, really cool. And to do it as, an amateur, hucking your stuff around, it's almost like you're the freelance, hunter of the dog training world. So that's pretty cool.
I don't know what
man.
it is, man, but I just going off of that, I will say I mean, obviously it's possible. You got to have a really nice dog, but so much of it is communication with your dog at the line, especially in the Super Retriever series. And if anybody was interested in getting into it, I would encourage you to watch those live streams and pay attention to the Stephen Durances, the Lyles, the Clarks. Watch what they're doing at the line with their dogs, because when you step on the mat, I mean, every movement you make is an opportunity to communicate something with your dog, and that plays into the Super Retrievers series so much, just because there's so much funky stuff going on.
Yeah. For those that are listening and are members of the Hunt Test Guide, Clark had a Q&A last night, and I only was able to jump in for like 20 minutes. But one of the things that he talked about was your field trial your first series or your second series?
Field trial was the first.
The first series.
Yeah.
He was talking about how that gun was so tight, and he felt like when he said that when he was sending the dogs with their name on that long mark, even if they gave him clearly where that bird was,
Mm-hmm.
they were flaring that gun really bad. That's what
Yeah.
he was noticing. And so what he finally ended up doing is he switched it and he actually ran it as a blind because they would be more disciplined with their line and they would push out there. And I was like, wow, that's really like those are little tiny things. And I'm only using that as an example because I heard a bunch of speculation that Pat or Chris or Leah was talking about, like why people were doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But and so I agree that you could learn a ton from that. But hearing what Clark was talking about, I was like, wow, I never would have thought about, because he's like, basically, it's no different than the pattern blinds I've been doing with these dogs forever, where you run off the backside of this gun, a blind, which is
Right.
super common. And so that's what he felt like he was getting, because he's like, once you got out there, you're finding it. And I thought that was a really interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Was
And a
there
lot of
anything that you kind of like, you made a big handling decision that you felt like paid off?
well, I won't say that it paid off. I don't know if it did or not. We'll never know. But there was actually only one mark that I really had to make a decision whether to handle or not, and that was in the fourth series. So for anybody that didn't or hasn't seen the live stream, the fourth series, the first two marks that came out were white coats. One of them was off your right, thrown from a shore onto a point, and I don't know how far that one was, 90 yards or so. But the long bird was across a pond, over a point, and across another piece of water. And I don't
And it
know
was a
what.
big encouragement swim, right? Like it looked far, and the
Definitely.
dog swam for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So the straight line of that bird was across the big body, over the point, and then back into the second piece of water. And that you ended up running that as a retired bird, but they threw those two, and then you sat down on a chair and you shot a mom and pop, which I think both of them were like at 160. Ended up being really tight to the standout gun that was on the shore. So three really tight marks there. But the mark that I ended up handling on was the long retired bird. And it's kind of funny because out of everything that Kate, I mean, I'm proud of everything that she did. But I was probably the most proud of how she ran. I was the most pleased with how she ran that mark. And
Mm.
ended up being the only one that I handled on. And the reason for that is because you train on those big watermarks like that long enough, you realize it's so difficult. I mean, it's one of the most difficult things to do is to get a dog to take a straight line through the water and then get back in the water over a point on a long retired bird. I mean, it takes a dog that's confident, it takes a dog with courage. You probably couldn't see it on the camera, but there was a decent crosswind at that time. So for her to fight the wind to stay in the water, I was really encouraged by. That's something like next spring during field trial season. I'm thinking, okay, well, let's see a little bit more
Will
of
she do
that.
it again?
Yeah, and in all honesty, I really wanted to let her. She got to the backside of the back piece of water a little bit left of the gun, and so at that point, just with the amount of points that I had to work with, I felt like I'd rather put a quick handle on her, put her on the bird, as opposed to let her try to figure it out, put on a big hunt, and then potentially have to handle anyway. So I played that mark safe. I really wanted to let her
Figure
try to
it
work
out.
that out because
Yeah.
where you come out there, it's kind of hard to tell, but they're not that far from the gun. They push up that hill, they find the gun, and they roll right back into the bird. And so you saw Carter Turner's dog Rig, who won in the open division, do that exact. His dog was on the exact same line. He had the guts to let him roll, and he worked it out. So I don't even remember where we started with that, but
Well, I was just like, did you have to make a decision at some point that you felt like you're glad you did it, or I
well,
just
yeah. At the end of the day, I think I did in that position. You almost have to handle
yeah.
because if you let the dog hunt and then you handle, especially after Paul Argonov had a fantastic run right before him and Cash, right before we ran. He put up like a 3 or 4 in that series, which is next to nothing. So yeah, you got to play it safe. Otherwise, you could potentially rack up quite a few points on just a big hunt to handle on that bird.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, is there anything else about the crown that you want to share with folks?
Well, I mean, we could go through. I don't know. We could go through each series if you want to, and just kind of talk about
Well, has
some.
the Super Retriever? I mean, because I'm assuming you're actually going to do that step by step on the Super Retriever podcast.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh, they
Maybe
just
at
normally
some
do
point.
that, so I felt like I'll let them do that part of it
Oh,
with you.
okay.
But was there anything else like with the experience or anything?
No, not really. But I'm probably like I said, I'm just bad about. I'm so focused on just what's
You
going
don't
on with my
remember what you
dog.
ate, the great food that you
Yeah.
had.
Oh, I
You're
ate
like, I
like
went
crap.
through KFC or something, and just got food and went to sleep.
Yeah. I mean, more or less.
Well, what? Okay, so let's talk about like kind of the future. Like, what's the near term? Like, do you hunt a lot in Indiana? I don't remember if you
Yeah.
do.
So we hunt quite a bit. I won't say that it's great all the time. We have a couple decent shoots every year. Had a couple in early goose season, September. Before we left for the crown, had a couple good hunts, and then we've got an early
That's
season
why
that
she
was
did
this
good.
year.
That's why she did good
Right?
because
Yeah.
you got her on
Yeah. The
some
goose hunt,
big old hunkers.
probably. But yeah, so we've got an early season that just ended. We missed that just because we were at the crown, and then it'll kick back up kind of the end of November is when that starts. And
Okay, so
yep,
you're not even open yet.
no, not right now at least.
Man,
So I
we're
think,
like in the drolls of November. Like
yeah, I
we
was
had a great couple of weeks here, like with our opener. We didn't see a ton of ducks, unfortunately, but I think I went like 7 for 7 and got a limit my first 7 hunts, and then it
very
just
nice.
went like "Meow." And
Yeah,
so kind of the last 3 I was like, why am I even out here? I know like they're all becoming stale. They all know where all the feeds are, but
yeah,
tomorrow.
that's kind of
The
how it
reason
is for us.
we started this podcast a little late because I was sitting and watching a big feed that I have permission on. So hopefully tomorrow
Yeah,
we're gonna smash them, but we'll see.
I was going
I
to
also
ask
have
you
a
if you
meeting
found
at
them.
9:30. Oh yeah, dude, we found them. I mean,
Yeah,
I was so blessed. A good friend of mine is a commercial broker, and he sells a lot of farmland, and so he knows like
perfect.
everybody. And so he's like, hey, I got there's this friend of mine. He's got like 5 fields, and it's like 5 fields in a row. And the roost, we have a mega roost of like probably 25 retention ponds along the west side of the last suburb here,
Uh-huh.
and they have one direction to go, and it's over this guy's fields, and
Yeah,
we've had feeds in it like 4 different times in different ones of his 5 fields, and so they just keep bopping around. They keep staying in his field, so I'm like, here we go.
that's
So
awesome.
I'm pretty stoked. But anyway, that enough about me. So what's your hunting to look like?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the same here. We'll have a push of, I mean, for us, it's usually geese. Gosh,
Yeah,
if we didn't have geese here, I'd probably have to, I don't know, take
move.
up knitting or something else. But yeah, we'll have a push of geese early, and then depending on the weather, you'll have a good push late. And if you're fortunate, you might have one in the middle. So we just try to take advantage and hunt them as hard as we can while they're here. But we're definitely not we're not a waterfowl mecca by any
By any
means.
means. So do you guys have any banding data of where your birds are coming from?
A lot of them so we don't kill that many to begin with. If we kill 3 or 4 bands a year, we've done pretty good. We might get late season in February. You might get one from further up north, but a lot of them are just banded locally.
Oh, you're killing
You know, on,
local bands. Interesting.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I find that data like super interesting. I think I might have talked about this in another podcast, but most of our birds, we get like 2 pushes of birds. Like right before season, we get a decent push from the south of Hudson Bay up in Canada. And that's like most of the birds that we're shooting the opener. We're not actually shooting that many local birds. And they pretty much get here,
Yeah.
and then they just kind of trickle in the first couple weeks, and then once they're here, we don't get another push of birds until it gets really cold up in Wisconsin, and the birds that are like the Horicon birds and the Madison, Wisconsin birds, like those two big marshes that are there.
Yeah.
If they don't get pushed out of there, man, we struggle for a long time, like late November, early December, until they freeze out up there, and then it gets really good down here again.
Right.
But anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, so we try. We just we're definitely not always killing. That's why I got into the competition side of things.
Yeah.
You know, if we can't kill them, we're gonna pay to have. We'll pay to let the dogs pick them up, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to come up here and come for a couple good. I mean, if you got a bunch of good goose hunting down there, you know, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can come up here, and we do pretty sneaking well up here. Like,
Yeah,
it's
I'd love to do
amazing
that,
how,
man.
especially when it gets when the snow hits here, the first week of snow, it is unbelievable.
Yeah, that was my window. I'll be texting you here in a couple months. Hey, remember on the
Oh,
time?
no doubt. I got a new house. I have nowhere for you to sleep yet, but there will be by that point. Yeah, sorry, I should like slow down. I'm so excited about this. But I finally bought a stinking house. It was like the hardest, like, I don't know why it was so
That's
hard,
awesome.
but I got a house. We moved in like a week and a half ago. We're slowly moving stuff in. But it has my pattern field in the back. I have almost 2 acres and I have a pattern field. And I walked out there 2 days ago and I set up my poles, my white bucket. My neighbors are probably like, what
That's
the
awesome.
heck is that guy doing? And I ran pattern blinds in the backyard with Rex. And just, it was a cool feeling to do that. And the other thing is I haven't said this, but Winter had puppies. She had 5, 4 yellow females and 1 black male. And they all have white toes, like very distinguished white toes, like Stroker had. Like,
Yeah.
there is no doubt they didn't mix up the semen. like these dogs are Stroker puppies.
No going to Maury on this one.
No. They look, they have the white toes and everything, and it was a pretty rough. I don't know. This might be interesting. It was a pretty rough birthing process this time. I mean, I haven't told you this story, have I?
No, you haven't.
Okay, so the first litter, she had 10 puppies, all natural. They just kept coming, you know, one after another. It was really quick. Well, this time she was due on the 22nd, and this was the 21st at like 9:00. She had some discharge, like some green discharge, and that happened last time, but the puppies came like within like 20 to 30 minutes last time. And so that happened. I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
We're all sitting down there waiting. And it was like 3.5 hours and nothing was happening. She wasn't even like having any sort of contractions or anything. I was like, what is this? So I called Lonnie, and Lonnie's like, yeah, you probably need to take her in. So we went in. And so at this point, it's like 1 a.m. So I'm doing the emergency vet deal. I'm like, oh my gosh, how much is this going to cost? And it was a lot, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I thought I was like, so I get there, and they're like, well, first question, who's more important, the puppies or the mom? I was like, what? Like, well, how are we there? You know?
Oh, come on. Yeah.
And I was like, I just got here. Like, this can't be like what we're talking about right now. I'm like, well, the mom, okay. They're like, all right. I was like, but it's just like, well, we want to do an emergency C-section. And I was like, okay, what's that cost? They're like $8,500. I'm like, what? I was like, $8,500. They're like, yeah, because I have to call and bring everybody back in. I was like, what are our other options? They're like, well, we can just, wait. I was like, we did an ultrasound and heartbeats and all the puppies are good. I was like, yeah, let's wait. I'm good with waiting a little bit. So then nothing happened for like 2 hours. And then they finally said, well, we're gonna give her some progesterone. Not progesterone. What is the thing that they give them to induce? Is it? I don't remember.
I don't know if it's progesterone or not.
No, it's not progesterone. It's oxytocin, right?
Okay.
Whatever it is to induce a human or a puppy or a dog to have birth.
Yeah,
So
they did that.
they did that, and she had the 4 puppies like within like an hour between, which is very normal. But then the last one, Miss Blue Collar, decided to not come out for a long time. So it ended up being like 4.5 hours. And so now it's like 7:00 in the morning, and I was sleeping like on the tile floor because they don't have. It's not like when your wife gives birth, like they have like at least the couch for you. No, I had nothing. So I literally walked out to my truck and I had a bunch of like hunting gear, and I like put it all in there, and I made myself like a little bed. So I'm sleeping there.
They didn't have a crate for you or anything?
Dude, it was rough. It was one of the rougher experiences because I was like, I gotta go. So like I just like threw her in the truck and drove and didn't think about anything. It was like, my wife's having a baby. I mean, my dog's having babies, like that's where my mentality was, right? So anyway, they go and they're like, yeah, they gave her like 2 more shots and nothing was moving. And they're like, yeah, you gotta have a C-section. And I was like, well, how much is that? They're like, well, you don't have to do it here. You can call other people. I was like, what? So then I'm on the phone, and luckily my normal vet's like, yeah, we can do it. So, you got to get here by 9:30. I was like, I'm on my way. And so it's still expensive because I live in Illinois, and everything around Chicago is more expensive. But I think it was it was $1,800 for the emergency visit and all the X-rays and the ultrasounds and inducing her, and then the puppy's birth in there was like $1,800. And then it was $2,000 for the C-section at my other vet. But I will take that any day over $8,500. I was like, holy cow, this is not what I want right now. And only have 5 puppies in there. I was like, this is like the horror stories that everybody says, don't breed your dog because it'll cost you money in the end.
You hate to think of it, but there's always that slight risk, that something like that's gonna happen. You hate to think that it ever would, but I'm glad that it worked out, and definitely a small price to pay to have a healthy mom and
and all the babies are doing good. They're just over 3 weeks old now. They're freaking huge. They are so much bigger right now than the first litter was.
Really?
And I'm like, I don't know if that's
at 100. Marking at 150 yards already.
Oh yeah. Well, they have eyes at least that are open, so that's good. They now see.
Give them a couple weeks.
They can now see mom's boobs, and they're like, there they are. Let's go get them.
Yeah.
Let's fight. It's amazing how much they fight over those things. Which I get it. It's their only food. So anyway, that's my what random updates I felt like maybe the listeners would like to know.
Yeah.
Now they will.
No, that's great.
Be scared to breed their dog.
It's good to know that you're not actually the hobo and the Hunt Test Hobo probably wasn't quite as funny there for a little bit as what it used to be.
Oh, dude, man, I was tired. I was exhausted, but I was hoboing it on the vet floor. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, we've went on for a long time. Again, congratulations. I can't wait to go hunting and do some training this year.
Thank you.
I'm planning a Texas trip. You should come along and we'll
go. Yeah,
we'll go
you can't. Can you work remote? Time.
Can you work remote yet?
We did a little bit during COVID, and then I work for a municipality, so they put the kibosh on working remote pretty quick.
Yeah. What do you do? I don't remember if I asked you that.
So I work for the local parks department. So
are you Ron Swanson?
I always, it's not even a joke, but if you have seen the show Parks and Recreation, that is my life. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I am as close to Ron Swanson as you will ever find. Yes.
yes, I love it. My wife, that's like our show. When we don't know what else to watch, we just figure out where were we last on Parks and Rec and just start. And you're in Indiana, so that's like even better.
Yes,
so.
I know the similarities are eerily similar.
Cool. Well, if you haven't seen that, I think it's on Hulu. You can watch it on Hulu. Park and Rec. It's great. It's great. Chris Pratt is one of the many stars in it. Great stuff. Well, thanks for a great episode, guys.